Welcome to episode 307 of the Red Dirt Agronomy Podcast. I am Dave Deacon, and we got a really fun episode for you this week. We took the show on the road a couple of weeks ago to be a part of the plot tours on the Rendell Farm, north of Miami, Oklahoma in Ottawa County. After Dr. Josh Lofton and Dr. Brian Rendell finished with their parts of the program, we sat down and talked Oklahoma wheat with Oklahoma State University Extension small grain specialist Dr. Amanda Silva, and then we talked forages and crops, as one does when they have a podcast based on agronomy, with OSU's Northeast Area Agronomist Brian Pugh. By the way, you'll be able to find the information we talked about on this episode and past episodes on our redesigned website, reddirtagronomy.com. As always, we start with a quick trip around the table, well, actually in this instance, around the shop, for an introduction to the dream team of dirt and everything that comes from it. Let's start with Oklahoma State University Extension Precision Nutrient Management Specialist.
You're the one earlier saying you're saying crazy stuff. Now you're throwing me under the bus like I'm saying crazy stuff.
Dr. Brian Arnell. And next to him is Oklahoma State University Extension Cropping System Specialist.
I'm always the one that says crazy stuff, though.
Dr. Josh Lofton. Let's kick off the episode with a chat with Oklahoma State University's Brian Pugh, which was recorded on May 2nd, 2024. You are listening to the Red Dirt Agronomy Podcast. Let's kick the tires and light the fires. Josh, I'll let you do this introduction.
Brian Pugh.
Excellent. Now back to the program.
Come on, Lofton, do it right.
I try to do it, and then you guys yell that I don't do it correctly. And so, Dave, we're up here in Ottawa County, up in northeast Oklahoma, for a little northeast area plot tour. And I'm not going to explain what the difference in those plot tours are, but we have a rare occurrence to where we have a guy that we can't pin down very often. Yeah. And so since he was here, we grabbed his car keys and didn't allow him to go anywhere so he could come and talk to us. But we got Northeast Area Agronomist Brian Pugh going to talk to us a little bit. How are you, Brian?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
He's scared.
He is scared. Brian Pugh, I never thought would be the one to say, I need something to prepare with. I feel like Brian could probably talk 6 hours to a fence post about what he does and not have any issue whatsoever.
I've been watching. He's been doing that in the crowd forever.
Yeah,
that's true.
So
I do enjoy talking.
Brian, tell us a little bit about kind of, for those of you that don't know, different part of the state, different state altogether. What do you do up here in northeast Oklahoma?
So I'm the area agronomy specialist for Northeast, and along those lines, probably 95% of my time or slightly better is spent in the forage sector. Again, real big in cow-calf, this part of the state. And we do have some row crops, and that's why we're here today, but spend a lot of my time in that area helping producers grow forage, different forage systems. Spend a lot of time with year-round grazing systems, both cool and warm season forages, and then also weed and brush control, another big area I spend a lot of time on.
The Graze 365 program that you've got in Perkins is really cool, and I know you work through those systems. So spend a little bit of time talking about what you're doing with that program.
Yeah, so, again, I think I don't know how in-depth we want to go here, so if I go too in-depth, you just tell me.
No, we'll stop you.
But I think, when we look at expenditures on cow herds, we know about half of what a producer spends on the cow is feed that goes in the front end of her, so that could be forage, hay, and supplement. And again, the biggest part of that would be supplement and purchase hay that we bring on into the operation. So one of my goals with a background in livestock and agronomy is, how do we grow that forage to meet the cows' not only dry matter intake requirements for the day, so we don't need hay, but also nutritional requirements, protein and energy. And we live in an awesome state. We live in the best state in the United States to be able to do that because we have such diversity in our ecoregions. We also have that diversity in our forages. So we see a lot of east to west transition occurring in Oklahoma and also north to south transition. So I tell people really any forage that makes it in North America can make it here in parts of Oklahoma. And the whole thing at Perkins is mainly starting with Bermuda grass, which a lot of people already have, and just maybe training them how to manage that forage a little bit better after September 1 by stockpiling that forage. and then really trying to incorporate a cool season forage into that system somewhere, which helps us again in cool season forage, grazing in winter. That's supplement, that's hay that we don't need for those cows. So that's kind of the idea behind it. And again, Perkins Station, Valiant Station, which is down in far southeast Oklahoma, used to do quite a bit of that at Haskell as well on the old station. It's where we've kind of cut our teeth on some of those practices. So,
what do you think is, when it comes to forage production in this country, what do you think is the low-hanging fruit for most producers as far as increasing?
Probably not going to answer this question the way you want, but again,
I know it's not fertility. It's okay.
In eastern Oklahoma, with Bermuda grass systems, to me that is the low-hanging fruit. We can add 2 to 3 months of additional grazing if we just manage that forage properly after September 1. So I hear producers say all the time when we get to the fall, Bermuda's done for the year. But with proper fertility and proper management, again, we can add 25% of Bermuda's growth occurs after September 1, so we can capitalize on that. So for me, that's the low-hanging fruit. I also think that we're going to have to start looking at how we make the cow do more of the work herself, just because of input cost, and that's not just feed, that's not just fertilizer, but it's also fuel. Equipment is so much more costly now. We've got to figure out how to be more efficient, stock these forage systems properly, not overgraze these areas, and make the cow do what she was meant to do, and that's harvest forage.
So I'll kind of
that
go.
That didn't answer your question.
No, you actually did. No, you did. Going back, you talked about something I think it's fascinating, diversity, and you don't have to deal with all of them per se because you got the western half changes, but we do go from a state, and I would say we go from Bahia to Love.
Yeah, and
those are two very different species.
Very. Yes.
I don't have a lot of work with Bahia. Because that's more even southeast from here. Talk a little bit about Bahia as a forage species, because I know that's all the rage south.
It is. Yeah, we run a lot of cattle on that in the southeast United States, and I was actually talking to a producer 2 nights ago at Veneta at a trade show, and told him that, Bahia grass, Dallas grass, those are species that one day you'll have someone call and say, how much fertility do I put on this? When do I need to graze it? And then the next day somebody's calling wanting to know what herbicide can I spray on it to kill it. But Bahia is very interesting. It really helps us in southeast Oklahoma because of the predominantly sandier type soils. Does really well there. Actually grows on a lot of sites that Bermuda grass will not thrive on. It has some issues. It tends to be a little less digestible, more indigestible fiber in that leaf portion. But again, with good management and with fertility, we can see great yields and again, maintain cows through the summer. And we do know from previous trials it's very similar to Bermuda in its response to nitrogen. So you put the fertility down and it will respond.
So I'll kind of ask the two of you, because you work on it a lot, especially the last couple of years, coming out of this drought, both non-native and native pastures. What let's say we're starting to have a good shape up to the summer, especially the eastern side of the state, we're starting to get a little more rain. So how do growers manage their pasture as we're starting to get that moisture to kind of maybe really recover those pastures that we were hoping happened last year but might really happen this year?
Yeah, that's a good question. So actually a topic I spent a lot of my time on last year and already doing the same thing this year. So I've talked a lot about forage CPR, critical pasture recovery. 3 steps that we can really recover a forage stand. Again, predominantly Bermuda grass here on the eastern side. First step is rest and recovery. We have to give those plants an opportunity that a cow's mouth is not constantly biting those leaves off. Those leaves are the solar panels that capture sunlight, create photosynthesis that the plant uses to restore that root system. So if we don't pull those grazing mouths off that at some point, it's hard to restore that previous stand. Second part would be the fertility. We have to offer those nutrients that plant needs, not only because we got behind the 8 ball with the drought, but again, just to encourage that plant to repopulate some of those open areas that we're seeing in these pastures. And then third, obviously, is control competition. Control those unpalatable species, whether that be broadleaf or grassy weeds. And again, they're robbing resources from us, and they're much more adept at filling in a hole than oftentimes a weak forage stand because it has been through the drought. So we've got to do something to basically shift the use of those resources back to that desirable forage.
And I'd say, Josh, it's not just the drought. So especially on Bermuda grass, not so much some of the others, and I guess some of our range out west too, it's that you coupled a dry spring with a cool spring. So Bermuda grass, you give it moisture and a little bit of spring warmth, and that sucker gets up and running, and it does a great job of reestablishing itself. But if you look at the spring of 22, the spring of 23, we were dry for one, but we also had a really, really late spring. Like, it did not get that time, and so a lot of those winter annuals, the bromes and the little barleys and a lot of those grasses, the weeds, they did
awesome.
They did great.
Yeah,
some of the best stands of little barley I have seen and Downey I've seen in so long of time. And then now we get about, I don't know about you, I assume you've had a million more than me, all the broom sedge, you know. And we used to say broom sedge or poverty grass, which this side of the state, Josh, it's broom sedge. West, it's wheat. Okay. So
yeah, got that.
we specified that. Comes with poor fertility. Is low P, low K, low pH. Those things were always indicators. Last couple of years, it's not necessarily the fertility. It's just the climate has allowed that sedge to take over, because the Bermuda grass, one, we had a couple green ups and then got frosted back. I think in 21 we had a great green up and then we got froze back. So there's a lot of...
Sorry, I was just going to say, 2 of the driest falls on record in the last 130 years have occurred here in the last 3 years. And that's a time when Bermuda grass is really wanting to partition some of those carbohydrates to, prepare for winter. That's a hard time to go through a drought for a perennial forage. But, yeah, you're exactly right. Really, the last 10 years between droughts, floods, late springs, fall droughts, that has been a major issue to those forages.
Didn't you just say this is the best place to grow forage?
Right.
It is.
So are we, I mean, we have been rather, I mean, this hasn't been maybe as cool as the recent springs, but we have not been consistently warm. We've had warm spells, but we've been cool in spots. So, I mean, are we really kind of on that road to recovery, or is all this rain going to naught because we are relatively cool still?
I think so. I think that's a good question. And what I saw last summer is by the time that the first killing frost hit in the fall, I still saw a lot of stands that I would say were probably 80% loss. Wow. That's 80% of that desirable stand is gone. But I also saw stands that were managed properly with those 3 strategies we talked about earlier, that by the last week of June, first week of July, we're not only fully covering the ground, but we're already starting to produce significant forage. So, again, having the nutrients there, resting that forage a little bit, letting it recover, and controlling the competition, that's the name of the game for me.
In this part of the country, and since Josh just asked that question, he's been doing a lot of research into cover crops. Is there an interest for cover crops on and over here, as Brian referred to it out there earlier, the garden part of the state where it's raining right now? It doesn't happen in western Oklahoma, but it's raining. Is there an interest for those cover crops?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that occurs probably everywhere. People are interested in that. They're reading lots of articles on that. And, again, the beauty of northeast Oklahoma is that we have a really good winter cover crop, which is tall fescue.
Right.
We see that on a lot of acreage, and then we have a good summer cover crop as well, which is Bermuda. But, yeah, we have a lot of producers who are using specific annuals as cover crops in the off season of another perennial crop. And I know Josh and I have talked about this before. If you have that Bermuda fescue system, you've pretty much got that you said 365-day grazing system. That's close to that. You've got a cover crop on that ground all the way through the year. So to me, that's important. And we can incorporate legumes into those fairly simply as well, which we all know that helps drastically. But
which is a different approach to cover crops than, say, what Josh has been working on there in the Stillwater Perkins area.
Well, yeah, and I mean, we kind of were talking about this before lunch, is that there's certain points in time we got to look at a system and say, okay, what are our growers gaining from a cover crop.
Right.
And, if you talk to cattlemen or forage producers that are only focused on forage, I asked Brian, what are we going to gain?
Yeah.
What is a grower going to gain if they're cost neutral? So let's say they're not making any extra money, they're not losing any extra money.
Right.
What's going to be that added advantage? And, like you said, in that Bermuda fescue continual rotation, I don't know if there is that much.
Yeah.
But there is a lot of cropland out here that could potentially be used as a cattle area, like in western Oklahoma, that maybe that cover crops, because they are more of an annual, could fill that need to maybe allow that to, maybe even just provide a 3-week rest period to where it can get off that Bermuda grass.
Yeah.
Come over
Great
here,
point.
graze it, and now it's gone. It's done what it needs to. Maybe I'll hay it to put it away for the or for the winter if I need it. But now that Bermuda grass has had 3 weeks to rest and recover, and maybe we can go back to that.
Right.
So there are strategies, just like in western Oklahoma over here, that we can do it. They're just maybe not as in every system, because we do have so many systems that stay green all year long over here.
No, I think that's a great point, and I guess the only thing I was going to also mention, which I believe we've discussed before, but cover cropping into live Bermuda grass, whether that be summer crops or even sod seeding small grains in the fall, that's so difficult because that Bermuda can be so aggressive. It already has an established root system, so you're behind the 8 ball with those crops that you seed into Bermuda. And again, that just happens to dominate here eastern Oklahoma.
So riddle me this, Batmans, both of you guys. So why aren't we? You're Batman.
I'm Batman.
Why aren't we grazing more corn stalks in Northeast to give that rest period? Because that timing of grazing corn stalks and resting Bermuda grass, that would overlap pretty well.
Yeah, I
Fences?
I don't. I that's the only thing I can
They
think
got
of.
cattle.
So
They don't know hot wire out here?
I feel like
Well, when you look out in the garden part of the state, it's adding hot wire or going to this fescue patch over here.
it is very unique. I think as you get from that I-35 corridor heading east, what we see is we have a lot of dedicated crop ground. Again, not near as much acreage as you see out west, but we don't see a lot of dual-purpose crop ground with grazing on it.
Right.
We do have a lot of cattle and a lot of dedicated pastures, but we just don't see the overlap. But absolutely, corn stalks, grain sorghum, stover, all of those things can actually work very well for running cattle on, and other states show that extremely successfully up through the Midwest, but we just don't see a lot of that here in eastern Oklahoma.
They don't want to stretch hot wire. I don't blame them.
I don't blame you. You already have a pre-fenced fescue patch.
Right.
Why do you want to string hot wire?
Come to Northeast Oklahoma, where it's nothing but lawn.
You're the one earlier saying you're saying crazy stuff. Now you're throwing me under the bus like I'm saying crazy stuff.
I'm always the one that says crazy stuff.
Well, I figured you were going to go to probably one of the biggest weeds in the state that we rely on a lot over here,
Right.
which is
You mean
also
Johnson
another.
grass?
I was thinking annual ryegrass.
Oh, right. Okay.
Ryegrass, yeah.
But again, we use a lot of that to kind of give Bermuda a little bit of a head start there too. So I do think there's lots of options that we can give that Bermuda the rest it needs, or the Bahia, or the Dallas grass, whatever it might be. Give it the rest it needs here early in the year. And we're not talking, I probably should have mentioned this earlier, we're not talking 2 to 3 months of rest. I mean, we're talking 3 to 4 weeks of rest can be significant in allowing that plant to get an extra 2 to 3, 4 leaves to capture some of those photosynthetates. So
Brian just came to my class and talked, and I think he had a great talk about this, and we talk about rotational grazing versus continuous grazing. And I think you gave a good analogy from a cattle perspective on what she eats and what she doesn't eat in these two different systems. Can you talk about kind of the difference in management of a system, whether it be rotational or continuous?
Sure. Yeah, you're gonna put me on the spot here, so this has to be brief, I'm assuming. But
No. We really got all the time in the world.
Yeah, we got time. Go for it. Stretch it out.
I think there's this big misnomer that rotational systems, because we've got all the fences, we've got to make management decisions on when to move them, that the cows do just so much better on rotational systems. And the point that we tried to make in that class that day is that's really not the case if we look at an individual animal. So from an individual animal performance standpoint, the best system would be a continuously stocked system, extensively stocked as well. So that one cow has lots of acreage she can walk across and pick the best quality forage out there, or the best species of forage out there. The beauty of the rotational systems is that what we're able to do is better capture forage that we grow and get it into a cow. By doing that, we're basically forcing animals to eat more of the plants that they normally would not. So what we do see is reduced individual animal performance on a rotational system, but because we can now run a few more animals, that gives us increased performance per acre. So we can see additional gains per acre, or we can stock a few more cows on the same property. And that's really, I think, what entices a lot of producers is that acreage is limited. Whether we want to admit it or not, it's getting more so each year. It's hard to go buy more land, but we can stock a few more cows again, just by rotationally grazing and utilizing more of the forage that we do grow.
So if we're talking outside of non-native forage pastures, so planted forage pastures, and we're moving into native ground, I think the one thing you really highlighted in the class is that, the cattle eat the species they want first, the most palatable or what have you. So if you continually graze and you have these ice cream plants or these heavily desirable, they might not be there for long because the cattle go and pick those first and might just graze those out of existence in that pasture.
Yeah, I try to tell people, cows are a selection tool. Really, any grazing livestock is a selection tool. They're going to go pick the most desirable forages, and not only the first time, but also the second, the third, the fourth time that they walk back past there. They will continue to eat that plant and, again, remove those solar panels, remove those leaves, and we eventually do see those plants die off. So that's why we rarely see Johnson grass or crabgrass in continuously grazed pastures, is because the cows just essentially won't let it grow. Yeah. That is that ice cream forage to them. And in native range, we see that with eastern gamma grass. It's one of the first ones to leave that system because it's highly palatable and preferred by the cattle.
When I was up on the tallgrass prairie, that was a fun time to come across an eastern gamma grass because it's
rare.
It's rare anyway.
It is.
But then, especially in a continual stock pasture, you have to find it before the cattle does.
That's right.
She's going to find it.
That's right.
So I'll ask out of complete ignorance here, like if we don't have cattle, I mean, this is the part of the state where we start adding a lot of different livestock into the system, goats and sheep and stuff like that. So how does management of a pasture change when you start changing those animals?
Oh, drastically. And I think that was probably one of the biggest learning experiences for me, 15, 20 years ago, is that not everybody runs cattle. We also have goats. We also have hair sheep. So what we do see is that, again, a cow will browse some. She will also eat some forbs like giant ragweed, but predominantly a cow is going to eat grass. What we see with hair sheep is that they really like forbs. There's a lot of broadleaf forbs that they prefer to eat before they ever think about browse or before they ever think about grass. And then goats are kind of the browsers. They're the ones that are going to go out there and get on their back legs. We've all seen the picture of it or seen them doing it. And they're going to eat the ends of those twigs, those tree limbs, any brushy, brambly type species. That's what they prefer. So really, that's where we spend a lot of time working with some of our producers, talking about multi-species grazing. I think there's really an application for that in the future to maybe get away from some herbicide use if those forbs we're trying to kill are actually palatable to, say, hair sheep. We can use the hair sheep not only as our quote-unquote natural herbicide, but we also get gains out of those hair sheep that we could then market and add revenue back to the operation. So,
yeah, my in-laws had a goat run up on the property one time, and I think that goat would rather eat a tin can than whatever the cows were eating. He'd eat whatever was there as long as it wasn't the grass the cattle were eating.
Absolutely.
Well, Brian, thank you so much for going on with us, and it's been a great chat about what's going on over here in the eastern part of the state.
Thank you. Appreciate you having me.
We're taking a quick break so that way we can switch out headsets. And while they do that, I want to remind you to hit the subscribe button where you get your podcasts. If you want to learn more about what Brian Pugh and the doctors were talking about, jump over to our redesigned website, reddirtagronomy.com, for all of that information and also a place where you can submit questions for the doctors. We're diving back into the episode with a chat about wheat across Oklahoma with Oklahoma State University's Extension Small Grain Specialist, Dr. Amanda Silva. Again, this was recorded on May 2nd, 2024. You are listening to the Red Dirt Agronomy Podcast.
Okay, so we are up in Ottawa County today, just outside of Miami. And I pronounced it properly there, so Miami.
Miami.
We're in Miami. We had the Northeast Oklahoma plot tour. So we, Dr. Loft and Josh, Dr. Silva, Amanda here, and myself with Randy Taylor, Dr. Taylor, we kind of talked about the ongoing research works that we have going up in the Northeast Oklahoma area. And wheat, sorghum, corn, and such. And so we were able to walk through our plots this morning. Really beautiful weather for it. The wheat's in really good shape up here.
Good shape.
And talked all things agronomy really with a great group.
Mm-hmm.
Just real quick, kind of go through the difference between a plot tour versus a field day versus a field tour.
So field tours is what Dr. Silva Amanda is doing a lot of right now, which is a wheat demo trials, variety trials, where it's the rolling road show of the varieties, wheat varieties. Mm-hmm. Field days are put on by our field research service unit, also the ag research group, and so you get a little bit heavier on the research side with those, and so you get a blend of the research group and the extension group at those field days, highlighting just a couple of them. And these field plot tours are just kind of that, like we all have research plots across the state.
Right.
And basically Josh and Amanda and I were like, we've got a lot of stuff 100 feet from each other, and so why not just do something, because we don't get up here very often to do extension field work. So just get an opportunity to let all the area know. And we had folks from Kansas, a lot of southeast Kansas came in. Some of the students at the local JUCO were here.
Oh, really?
So I had a nice little group. I had met a young man who'll be in Stillwater in December. Or I guess in January.
Cool.
Well, and this is all associated with, we have a NIFA.
Yeah, sure.
But it's a research NIFA. It's a research grant that is looking at the intensification and sustainability of cropping systems in dryland Oklahoma. So basically, most of the stuff outside the panhandle that focuses on Mother Nature for rain, looking at how much we can intensify these systems and focus not only on the production, the economic, but also the sustainability of the system. And a lot of the projects we kind of highlighted today were associated with that. So it was a nice multiple birds with a single stone kind of trip up here in the Northeast.
By the way, it's not dry land. Dr. Auctioner would be very upset with you. It is rain-fed. Those are two different categories.
Rain-fed.
Dry land is drier than rain-fed, is my understanding.
Well, and it was pretty well attended also. Probably 40 folks up here. That's pretty good size we're in Ottawa County, right?
Ottawa County.
Okay. Ottawa County.
Yep. Well, one of the featured speakers today was Dr. Amanda Silva, and you've been all over the state. We're recording this the second day of May, and you have seen more windshield time while driving the state, looking at wheat, giving updates on wheat than most people should. And what have you been seeing? Just a generalization of the wheat crop from one side of the state to the other.
Yeah, so we are on the second week of our tours, or plot tours, field tours.
Right.
And what I've been seeing, so we started southwest last week, then moved a little bit to central Oklahoma, touched a little bit on west side, and moving up. Yeah. So yes, there is a difference. Southwest wheat looks a little bit better than northwestern wheat.
Right.
on the western side of Oklahoma, it's been a hit and miss. Like even a tweet post I did, I showed a picture of a field that we were in that area that was really drought stressed.
Right.
And then Brian has some plots nearby that are looking great. And actually that reflects what producers were telling me there in that region, that it's being a hit and miss.
Yeah, so those plots, they'll probably make 65, 70 bushel, and I have plots just 3 miles east that may make 35.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's how it's being. But overall, Southwest, I would say we are looking a little bit better than the northern part of the state. Of course, you're going to move there. We are going to see how it goes with the latest rains and hopefully not much hail damage or storms or something. But
so especially in northwest, north central, where they have been so dry for so long, especially during these critical developmental stages, we're past anthesis, we're kind of developing grain. How much recovery is there with these recent rains for some of these growers?
Yeah, if it's after anthesis, then starting grain filling, all grain number have been set on wheat. So that happens during that critical period, right? So after jointing, before anthesis or flowering, that's when we need most rain to put grains in the head. Right now, I think recovery is hard to say, but it could help to sustain whatever is there, help with grain filling. But it could be late, yeah.
So, like, how much yield if a normal grower that's already been drought stressed, how much can they account for tillers, which will be a little bit more delayed in maturity? Is that correct?
Yes.
How much yield can be accounted for in those tillers that still might be maybe in some places at the stage to where a nice rain event can help?
Oh, I think it's hard to say how much. Like, give a number. I don't know if I can give you a number. Yeah,
10,
can
10
you?
per
Can
on the
you?
spot.
I just
10% of yield. I don't know.
I just think
so.
depends on a lot of things.
Depends on
yeah.
I mean,
I figure if it's already really stressed, it's probably sloughed a lot of those tillers off anyway. But
we have had years where you take the main tiller loss and go with the secondaries, or tertiaries. I mean, this is that late tillering group where you lose your primaries because you've got more, and so it's all about head number, head size, and so. It's too variable to say anything from you could add 10%. Usually, if you get those to harvest, you've lost your main.
That's what I was going to say.
It's one crop or the other. You don't get to do both.
We see that, like, for example, when we have freeze damage, then we see those secondary tillers really coming and then helping a little with wheat. But then if you're hoping to sustain that main stem, having those secondary, sustaining that too, I think it's difficult in our environment. I don't know if we would have got enough rain to sustain both. But anyways, another thing that we saw this year was a very big, heavy stripe rust infestation. Right. So you probably have heard that. I talked to producers, and it's been one of the worst stripe rust infestations in a long time. And it came in early, so it got people off guard, Heard maybe 90% of producers in Southwest sprayed fungicide. So there was a time, sometime in March, that there was a lot of fungicide going on. And the reason why we saw that so bad, it's because it was early on wheat stage. So wheat has two types of resistance to stripe rust. So it has the adult plant resistance and the young plant resistance, or seedling plant resistance. And by the time that rust came in, most of the varieties that we grow in our state don't have much of a seedling resistance. Some do tolerate better than others, and that's what we are going to be rating in the plots. But that's why we needed that fungicide.
Well, I mean, this is the first year in the last 3 that we've even thought about jointing fungicide. Right. We haven't had the weather conditions for, because I'd been burnt by stripe rust enough, especially in Chickasha. You get that that central area. I've been burnt by stripe rust too many times to not do. I've just gone to a traditional 2-pass system in my research with a generic tab or something like that up at jointing. I hadn't done that. I didn't do it in 23. I didn't do it in 22.
No, it was very dry.
21. I don't know if I did. This year's the first year we got back in on doing that jointing application. At least in you got that pocket in the Northwest, we didn't. But I mean, this was a disease year.
It was. And that's the thing. Whenever it's a good year, so it started good for wheat, it's in general good for striped rust too. That's when we got moisture.
I did see, we didn't talk about it. It's interesting. We have some nitrogen rate timing stuff up here in Ottawa County, and Josh and I were walking through it. The early pre had a lot more flag leaf damage and a lot more yellow, whether it was disease or other things. The later end stuff was a lot cleaner leaf tissue, kind of showing that difference and having that. Because it was pretty growthy here. I mean, this was a soft wheat field, pretty growthy early, and so you could see that difference in timing on fungicide or on the fungal impact.
That's interesting. Yeah.
We talk about rust a lot. You know, most years, you know, we talk about rust to some degree. Has there been any other diseases, you know, mildews or anything like that has come in that's going to be a significant impact, or just little pockets here and there that aren't going to be that
mildew?
big?
The first time I'm seeing it's now here in the Ottawa places where we have moisture. Usually we see, so I think that's a lot of lush forage. That's when we see it. I haven't seen it that bad. I know Miriam has seen septoria. We've seen some leaf rust, but maybe septoria could be something of an impact, especially in no-till fields.
What about, so this is a region up here it's fairly unique, I think, for the state, where they can deal with this region and kind of stretching southwest here, is a head scab.
Yes.
So can you talk a little bit about head scab and its effect on wheat and why it's unique to this area?
Yeah, so here the moisture is really what prones the fungal disease development, and Maria can talk more about this.
No.
But yeah, it usually affects wheat at anthesis, so there is a specific time of that fungicide application that, not as specific, but they will target that disease more than, you know, sometimes they can combine it with a rust management, but it can affect grain quality. And yeah, usually this is the environment that is really moist during flowering. That's
Isn't
what
there
it
something
prones.
about the corn-wheat rotation also?
And it comes from corn. Yeah. It can come from corn. It can affect corn and affect wheat. So in general, that's where we see also in that rotation, wheat following corn, and then it gets the fusarium head blight. So that's the
Isn't it? It's like so many things have to happen kind of all at the same time. You know, you got to have the humidity, got to have fusarium in the field, a rain right at anthesis, and all this kind of combined to do it. It's why it's so rare sometimes.
And
But,
here, it doesn't. I'm not seeing here today. So
not today, but so why this country is so bad at it, or bad is so we have, you know, the May rains, which typically come through here right at that anthesis. Their soil type is much heavier, so you have a shallow, heavy clay, and so it holds that moisture up more, and then
creates that little microclimate in the
little
canopy.
microclimate, and then really there is no continuous wheat up here. It is a corn, wheat, soy rotation, and so almost every wheat field is following corn.
That's very prone. It makes it very prone. You know, and there were years that we actually found in north central Oklahoma. There was one year that we actually measured it in the grain, like the damage in Kildare.
Yep.
I was very surprised because it was kind of moving down, you know, in the state. Haven't seen it being bad, but it's an area that it can happen. Depending on when the rains happen, like you're saying, it could happen.
we got to have the summer environment to promote fusarium for that to happen.
But the thing is, we don't have many varieties with resistance to it.
Yep.
So that's a problem too. So here it's one of the things they do. They try to grow varieties that have a little bit better tolerance than others. I know Dr. Carver is working in one experimental that has a very good resistance. But so far it's, in general, they need to plant a fungicide.
This was a very active group of producers. They all didn't just stand around and just look at each other. There were a lot of great questions. Kind of run through a couple of the questions that maybe the producers brought to your attention, because these are farmers that are in it for the for a good crop.
Yeah. Let me see if I can remember the question.
Here comes the deep media editing.
Well, yeah, I was going to say this will all be edited, but
no, it definitely won't.
It's fine.
But I've been to field days where they just stand there and go.
No, this was a very good crowd. We could see that they were interested in the topic. So something that we presented here today that the Rendell family is really helping us to set up is the planting date study. And a question we had, it's actually came from one of my previous master student who is now a PhD. It's on the optimal seeding rate and planting date and depending on variety type of question. So here today we had 3 different planting dates, a short season wheat and a common full season wheat. And so we were wondering about, well, what would that be about seeding rate? So in his study, we didn't really see differences in 2 seeding rates we were testing when you're planting late. Because the common knowledge is when you delay planting, you need to increase seeding rate, as plants don't have much time for fall tillering production. And we were surprised that by increasing from 870,000 seeds to 1.4 million, we weren't seeing differences in yield. And so here today we are evaluating from 500,000 up to 1.3 million.
Wow.
So we are covering a bigger range. And that was actually the 2 extremes. I think it was, the 2 extremes were the Brent's idea. So I was like more conservative on the number of plots that we could put here, and he was like, no, let's just do this. So all those seeding rates, and then looking at varieties with the different not growth habit, but the growing season length, let's say.
Hold on, Brian. I do have to ask, how do you count all those seeds? Is it an estimate? Do you 1, 2, 3? Because Brian in his presentation today said, I'm not going to give you a number. I'm going to give you a weight. On the seeds.
In the lab, in general, what we do in the lab, we just do by variety. We just get seeds per pound.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and then you kind of estimate from there the seeds per acre you want to
have. It's more of a historic system. I know in my head. I've gotten better at knowing the numbers, at least on average. But you know,
I just wanted to ask that because I thought, man, that's amazing. You have like 3 grad students over there going 27, 28.
No, we have a machine that weights at least. So that speeds up. So once we decide the seeds per pound per variety, every year we do that because it changes. Yeah. It can change from one year to the other depending on the growing season, the variety experienced, the lot number. Yeah. So we do like per variety per year and don't do every seed bag or something. But and then we have a machine that weights, and we just specify what is the weight per package, and then that's what we do.
Perfect.
Yeah. So we know what is the weight that it needs to be for that variety to be on a certain seeding rate.
Right.
And here he's doing on the go. As you saw him talking, he was like, okay, this is one planting date. Every 200 feet, he changed seeding rate. Yeah. It's amazing. So he just did the randomization of the plots on the go. So plots are 40 feet wide by 200 feet long.
Wow.
Yeah, it's amazing.
So you also had the planting dates. I didn't get to walk down there and see the late. How did the late look? Because I was up here 2 weeks ago, hadn't quite headed out yet. Yeah. How was the late looking? December.
It looks good, but you can definitely see the difference. So it looks a little thinner. You see the lack of tillering in comparison to October planting wheat. A little shorter, but not much. Maybe 2-3 inches shorter. Seeding rate, we can see more visually. We can see more differences with the extremes as you walk down on that alley there. But yeah, I don't know how much that will be accounting for yield. I know Jeff Wright has done some plots research there at Chickasha, where he's comparing 500 up to 1.2 millions, and he didn't see any difference in between, but he sees difference from the 500,000 to that 1.2 million seeds per acre.
I have to have Brent talk about it a little bit, but I think he said something interesting. He said, the Butler's Gold was typically the same growth stage of the high cotton of the previous planting date.
It's amazing.
So, it's having that Butler's Gold and the high cotton.
Yeah, and somebody was asking me, well, since Butler's goes so early, isn't that going to get caught by late spring freezes? Yes, it will if you plant in October. So that's a variety that we say short season. You should not be planting that in October because you plant in December and it catches up with the rest, with the October or early November planting date variety. So we are seeing that at Chickasha. So it was planted 1 month later and heading date was the same as the rest.
What has been, and we'll do, at the end of the season, we'll just do a whole, the whole show devoted to the season. But what has been your biggest aha moment with this wheat crop? Because the past couple of years have not been great wheat years, but this year it's been better. Mm-hmm. What have you really been surprised with so far with this crop?
Well, I don't know if I would say surprising, but we are learning a lot about stripe rust this year. Mm. So that's how we are using the plots this year. So we say canopy hygiene.
Oh, okay.
On the varieties, so that stay green, because sometimes you have stripe rust, but you also have some other things going on. And some varieties, they just show better hygiene than others, and the ability to bounce back from that early stripe rust infestation. So Altos especially, I think will be a plot that we are going to learn a lot about that. Yeah. So my crew they've been rating the plots all over the state. So,
wow. And so are we seeing more stripe rust in one part of the state versus the other? Obviously a more wet part of the state versus a drier part of the state.
For sure, moisture has a big impact on the disease. I think early on we saw it more in Southwest, but we are seeing in Lahoma, we are seeing Stillwater, for example. So it's kind of moving. Another thing that is moving is leaf rust. It doesn't seem to be under heavy pressure right now, but I would be on the lookout for it.
What growth stage does it not matter anymore? What growth stage do we get to the point that we're just going to ride it out? We're 2 weeks away from harvest.
Yeah, something like that. I would say around maybe soft dough or something. Okay. Yeah, the plants already basically have remobilized almost everything to the grain.
Right.
And then from there, you're just going to kind of...
Plus you have harvest restrictions.
For the harvest restrictions.
You wouldn't spray.
Right.
You wouldn't
I was
spray
just wondering
physiologically or maybe yield-wise. But you wouldn't be spraying at that point.
That was the tough thing last year that came in is we were probably right at that borderline of when you could or when you would worry about it physiologically, but whenever you look at the fungicides that they could spray, it was you can't spray. So it was all just do I want to tell myself I'm going to have to wait and have wheat sit in the field for 2 weeks and make an application or roll the dice?
Yeah.
And I know there were some growers that said that they were glad they didn't spray, and there were some that said that they should have sprayed. They should have sprayed and waited those 2 extra weeks for that pre-harvest because they felt like they really got hit on the yield quite a bit.
Yeah, most of the I can't remember all labels, but I believe most of the fungicides by flowering except for the ones spraying for scab. That gives a little more room.
So this is kind of one for both of you. Is we don't know yet.
Mm-hmm. Me and Amanda.
Yeah.
Okay.
Everybody can see his point.
Right.
Well, I figured the two of you that I pointed at would answer.
The doctors at the table. I'll just sit over here and run the board.
You're so mean to
we
Dave.
We don't know, but based on kind of the environment that's here and how the wheat's looking, is this? I don't want to say is protein going to be a premium because I don't mean that, but I mean is good protein going to be hard to come by this year? We think, or is it going to be one of those things that I know we have a lot of season left to kind of develop that out and.
Well, it has cooled down a little bit, so it could help with a slow grain filling, hopefully good protein, not a heat-stressed kind of thing. But yeah, like you said, there's a lot of season, but maybe
So throughout the Southwest, because it's so striped up, that the drought zones will be high pro, the wet, because it's those rain swaths. I would say we're going to have pockets of lower protein. It's going to average out at the co-op. Northwest, because so many of those folks didn't get that February, March rain when they wanted to fertilize, it's going to be hit or miss. So we're going to have some low pro and some high pro, just depending on their management on that and mix. I think we're so scattered this year, you can't come in. There's some years that we're statewide, good wet, greenhouse, cool conditions, where we could just say we're going to be low pro. But I think our previous environments got enough variability to it that we're going to see a bunch of mixed bag.
I guess that was my other question coming in is how much did the challenge on nitrogen management maybe going to affect that? Because there's some folks that are getting their first real true rain of the spring.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, that country around Red Rock just north of us, it was a month ago that the UAN streamer nozzle on in end of February finally showed up middle April. And so it was just that long to get incorporation. So that ground, it's hard to tell.
Yeah, Cody Solon's up there around Red Rock sent me a picture, and just the lack of moisture in that neck of the woods, it's been tough. But when I'm one of those date guys. When will rainfall not really matter anymore? Because here we are, the second day in May, and in my mind, I'm already kind of my eyes on harvest. Is it? Do we have like 2 more weeks of let's try to make a crop, or
it's gonna help? My belief is gonna help to keep what is out there.
Yeah,
it's not gonna. The rain now after flowering is not gonna help to produce any new yield. Let's say So whatever you have left, it's gonna help to sustain that, so it doesn't decay from there.
Right.
But all the most of the yields that we see comes from number of grains per area, and that has been set already.
Yeah.
Around jointing stage, something like that, and then maybe number of heads. So it's gonna help to sustain that, but not produce any new. So if that makes sense.
Oh yeah.
So we got a cap. We just don't have a floor yet.
Yeah.
So it's we know how much our yield potential is at. We just don't know how much it could fall to, given conditions.
Yeah, because it's gonna help with, like I said before, grain filling. But the grains that are already there is not going to be producing any new grain in that head.
One thing I found interesting that Brian was talking about in the talk earlier was whenever he talked about stressing the crop and how the amount of quality, I guess, grain at the top, that's kind of what you're going for, and everything else is like kind of bonus after that.
So
did I understand that correctly?
Kind of sort of one thing that we're doing, and it comes from some work Dr. Silva's done and some of her collaborators, is it's really about tiller number.
Yeah.
And so they see when there's a reduction of tillers, that head is able to fill out those spikelets that berries further up.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, especially when you get to western Oklahoma, our tertiary and those later tillers, they take resources, but the heads are no more than an inch tall, and you don't really get him. Doesn't really get it to anywhere,
right?
And you sacrifice the resources that could have gone to the main tillers.
Right.
So we're trying to see, can we do tiller control with nitrogen?
Yeah.
And then it puts more resources to that main head.
And that's kind of what we try to promote, like with seeding rate, for
Right.
example. When you increase seeding rate, you're trying to reduce the number of secondary tillers, and I don't know, reduce that, but you're wanting to promote main tillers.
Right.
Yeah. So bigger heads.
Right.
And then the other study that we'll be doing together with Arnau will be, what is the best management to do that, to sustain that in different planting date scenarios.
Yeah. I just found that very interesting that you can make adjustments to the way that you grow the crop to enhance those opportunities for the tillers to be more full at the higher levels of the plant.
Yeah,
it's very interesting. Well, thank you so much for going on with us, and be sure and get caught up on the old episodes of the Red Dirt Agronomy podcast as you're traveling the state from Miami all the way down to Hollis. Just I'm sure you can get caught up in at least, what is that, a 7-hour drive? Well, maybe 2 episodes.
Oh, yeah. I've been put a lot of hours, so really, we still have a few more weeks to go, so really encourage people to come out, see us at the tours.
Thank you for listening in on this conversation of the Red Dirt Agronomy podcast. And if you'd like to join the next discussion, send us an email, podcast@reddirtagronomy.com, or send us a tweet. Our handle is reddirtag. We would like to thank Oklahoma State University Extension Northeast Area Agronomist, Brian Pugh, and OSU Extension Small Grain Specialist, Dr. Amanda Silva. If you get a chance, head over to our website where you can find out more information about our guests and any of the resources that we talked about on today's podcast or previous podcast. Head over to reddirtagronomy.com. For Dr. Josh Lofton and Dr. Brian Rendell, I am not a doctor, but I play one on a podcast, Dave Deacon, and we all want to thank you for listening. The proceeding is a copyrighted recording of Agnow Media, LLC, 2024. And yes, all rights are reserved.